Welcome back to Mapping Healthcare on KDRT 95.7 FM in Davis, California, a radio show and podcast where a medic with a map explores healthcare around the world, highlights people who improve it, and shares what we can learn from them. This is your host, Dr. Sheikh. I was at IKEA recently and on my way out passed a little stand that had 5 buttons with expressions ranging from grumpy to delighted, and instructions for me to press the button that best reflected my experience at the store that day. Then I came back home and was looking through my mail. There was a bulky envelope with a 5-page survey with over 30 questions asking me about my experience at my last visit to my doctor. People selling products, whether they are your favorite household goods store or your doctor's office, want to measure what you think of their services. I responded to that request from IKEA right away as I was exiting the store, but I suspect that I may have put off answering that 5-page survey for a few weeks. I actually did okay because the response rates to these mail-in patient experience surveys are only about 20 to 40%. There's also some bias in who actually takes the time to answer these surveys. People who are thrilled with their healthcare or people who are angry about their experience tend to answer them more frequently. And then there are people like me with an academic interest in surveys. There's a difference in response rates depending on if the survey was mail-in or online, patients' ages, their socioeconomic status, and if they have complex medical issues they're dealing with. In this episode, we talk about PROMs and PREMs, patient-reported outcome measures and patient-reported experience measures. These are surveys that seek people's views and opinions on their health status, well-being, and their perception of their experience while receiving care at their clinician's office or other healthcare facility. The questions include things like did they get timely appointments or easy access to information, or if medical information was communicated clearly to them. Understanding this experience helps us figure out how healthcare systems are doing and what we can do better. Aspects of patient experience like communication of health information, for example, is related to people following medical advice better, doing well clinically, taking medication safely, and accessing healthcare when they need it. Our guest in today's episode of Mapping Healthcare is Dr. Ezequiel García-Elorrio, who is the director of the Department of Quality, Patient Safety, and Clinical Management at the Institute for Clinical Effectiveness and Health Policy in Argentina. He is also the president of the International Society for Quality in Healthcare, or ISQA. I hang out with Ezequiel virtually quite a bit in my role as an ISQA board member, and although we are located in opposite hemispheres, we have quite a bit in common in our shared experiences as practicing physicians who are also medical educators and health services researchers. Ezequiel works in the area of patient-reported outcomes and tells us about his experience with understanding patient experience in Argentina and cultural and other contexts that he and his team need to pay attention to as they collect, interpret, and use this information. We also chat about his country's intense soccer culture, why I need to see a soccer game there, and his advice on what I need to do to keep myself safe during one of those games. The views expressed on the show are mine and those of my guests. So Ezequiel, welcome to the show. You are the director of the Department of Quality, Patient Safety, and Clinical Management at the Institute for Clinical Effectiveness and Health Policy in Argentina. Tell us about your path to that role and what this job involves.
Hi, Olfa. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with you today. As you know, I work back in Buenos Aires in Argentina, where I'm part of the Institute for Clinical Effectiveness and Health Policy, which is an academic NGO that has interest in health services research around the world. We are about 130 people. For the last 25 years, we have been developing the institute, and I lead a group that works in quality of care and patient safety. As a lead of that group, we're about 13 people working in projects that are related to research in Argentina and the region, sometimes in other continents. And also we teach and we try to do some of the advocacy work. So it's interesting, it's challenging, and we have been doing good things for our region.
Yeah, thanks, Ezequiel. And if you could briefly tell us about your path to that role. You know, you're a physician, so just your path to how you got to that job.
Well, I went to medical school in Buenos Aires. I got the chance to do a residency program at the teaching hospital I've been in. And I graduated as an internal medicine doctor. But along the way, I feel interested in epidemiology. And I had the chance through the Kellogg Foundation scholarship to attend the Harvard School of Public Health. And I completed a master's degree in epidemiology, and that changed my life. Trying to have another sense of how medicine could be viewed in a different perspective was really amazing. And I would say, lucky, and I joined another Argentinians that were in the same program the same year. And together we went back to Buenos Aires. We reproduced the same program that we took, the program in clinical effectiveness in Buenos Aires. We have been doing that for 25, 26 years. And since then, I joined this group. And first, we ran the master's program at the University of Buenos Aires. And then we started the institute about 23 years ago. So I still practice clinical medicine. I do ambulatory care. I do not provide, I would say, lots of times to my clinical duties. I may see patients once a week, but I really like it. That's kind of common in the US to combine clinical practice with research. In my country, it's less likely. First, it's unlikely for a clinician to get into research, especially in health services. And also, it's difficult to combine two jobs. But I was lucky enough to get together these two things a long time. Who knows what the future will bring? I also took an MBA and improved my management skills, so that helped. And finally, I completed what I call a Dr. PH. I wouldn't say it's a full PhD, it's a Dr. PH, which got me more into research methods and more into health services research. So I couldn't say that I'm very fluent in all the languages that I speak, but I can speak the clinical language, the research language, and the management language. Hopefully all of those are better than my English, but somehow I would say that it was an interesting journey.
Really interesting journey indeed. Being a clinician and a researcher and a teacher as well, similar role to yours, I feel like you're completely right. It's good to experience the clinical aspects of things because then you can figure out what the problems are and you can bring those questions to your research. I do that all the time. I see what my patients are going through and that starts off a hypothesis, a research question, and I bring that to my work. So that's great to see how, as a physician, and you've specialized in internal medicine, you've also gathered skills in epidemiology through your master's degree and your doctorate, and now you lead a research group focusing on improving healthcare practices and services around Latin America. So really inspiring to see your journey there. So let's talk about a focus of this episode, which is patient-reported outcomes. And you've been working in the area of patient-reported outcomes, or PROs. For our listeners, patient-reported outcomes are essentially information about a patient's health that we can get directly from the patient. This information could be a patient's description of their symptoms, their satisfaction with the healthcare they receive, or how their medical condition affects their health and well-being. And patient-reported outcomes are basically meant to help us understand and appreciate the patient experience firsthand. And one way people gather this information is through questionnaires. And these days we're seeing some of this information collected digitally from patients through what's called EPROS, or electronic patient-reported outcomes, through their smartphones or their wearable devices. So, there's a lot of work going on in expanding this field. But tell us about one of your recent projects around patient-reported outcomes.
My career started using patient-reported experience measures, because even my master's degree research project thesis was related to the validation of surveys to measure experience from patients. So I would say that along most of my research life, I have worked in these PREMs, experience measures. And most recently, we have started to work in PROMs. And this relates to the concept that, my country, it's a country where I would say that's somehow similar to the US in some ways, that we waste lots of resources in healthcare. But recently, last 3-4 years, we understood that we need to deliver a different message to our setting in terms of trying to reduce waste. And for that, we have decided to work in pilot projects, just trying to collect PREMs and PROMs in different conditions. So we just started 3 projects just trying to measure the experience through different scales and also outcome measures by other scales and quality of life scales and other related to particular conditions. So we are working now on lung cancer treatment. We're also working in trying to improve flow of patients for breast cancer, also measuring some outcomes from them. And finally, we'll start another project working in COPD, and again, using validated scales for doing this. Whatever concept we can provide in understanding the patient perspective in a way that is more accurate whenever it's coming from them, having their voice next to me in terms of understanding directly what they're feeling or suffering, it's critical either in research or clinical practice.
So it looks like the work that you do in patient-reported outcomes or patient-reported experience measures spans a range of conditions. You mentioned lung cancer, you mentioned COPD, which for our listeners that may not be aware of this acronym is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So it's a chronic lung disease, essentially. This is a really great description of how one might use this type of measurement for a range of conditions. And in the United States, we face many issues with healthcare. We have high costs, long wait times for care, and quite a bit of variation in people's experience with the healthcare system and their trust in it. And I read about this recent survey of countries in Latin America, and it was striking to me that Argentina, in that survey, had the highest proportion of people who reported that they trusted their country's healthcare system to provide good healthcare. And about half of the respondents from Argentina in the survey, they rated the quality of their healthcare as good or very good, which is, really strong performance there. And this is even though, just like in the US, we faced this issue, but the survey showed that in Argentina too, there was quite a large proportion of people who answered the survey who reported that healthcare is still hard to afford for many people, that wait times could be long. And you've been working for so many years on understanding consumer experience and satisfaction with a healthcare system in your country. What are some of the challenges with evaluating patient experience and satisfaction that you face in Argentina? And are there any cultural or other contexts that you and your colleagues need to pay special attention to that affect your interpretation of these satisfaction data in your context?
Well, first, I'd like to comment on what's the context here. Measuring patient experiences is not mandatory. So we have some measures that are not mandatory. The culture of measuring performance in general and measuring experience from patients is not quite established. So that's the context. Then you have the issue that we are not conducting repeated measures. So if you run a survey, each time different, every once in a while, it will be very difficult for you to interpret the results. So I have the sense that people finally are not very used to be interviewed about the healthcare. So they usually feel somehow afraid if their responses could affect somehow their health provision. So for the moment, this is just starting. Of course, it's important because they provide very important information. And whenever they read about other patients commenting, giving opinions, they pay attention to that. So I would say still a work in progress. We conduct a systematic review on satisfaction surveys or experience surveys in the region, and they're very few, not very standardized. So the word you refers about the PVS, the People Voice Survey, was very interesting. But again, we had the chance recently to conduct another wave of surveys, not in Argentina, but Uruguay, Colombia, and Peru. So we'll see how those repeated measures show change, either related to an intervention that may have happened, or eventually people might be more used to be questioned about healthcare. The most popular healthcare experience measures that we have now is the NPS. The NPS, it's simple. I would say it's straightforward to understand. It's an index. It's constructed by the question that says, if will you recommend this doctor, for example, and you score from 1 to 10, you have a percentage of people that eventually will highly recommend a service. So it's a happy face you see in airports and other places where you put a number on the face. And with that, you are providing real-time information to whoever's giving you the service about what you think in a very quick question.
Yeah, and you're talking about the Net Promoter Score, and I've seen that in different
Yes.
places. I remember, go get my car serviced and come back, and I've seen that for
Yes.
years, and now it's moved into healthcare. Would you recommend that service to your friend, for example, right? Those sorts of questions. Let's now move on to some of your work in public health. You are also a professor at the Center for Medical Education and Clinical Research University and the University of Buenos Aires School of Public Health. I was reading that the University of Buenos Aires is the largest university in Argentina and the second largest in Latin America. It's really been around for a long time. It was established in 1821, I read, and has educated several of your country's presidents and Nobel laureates, and it produces a large proportion of Argentina's research output. And you've worked on projects supported by the World Health Organization, the Agency for International Development, among a few organizations to name. So tell us about one of your projects in the area of public health.
A very interesting project that we're working now on is we got funded by NIHR in the UK. That's the Agency for Health Research. And we have been funded for a project that's starting that it's looking to improve the care people with diabetes receive in primary care in the public system of Mendoza. That's a province in Argentina. So in Mendoza, we will run a clinical trial trying to randomize centers to get a co-produced intervention with patients and providers to improve the management of diabetes for these people. It's a very demanding project, and it's, I would say, the most important project that we have ever proposed. And the design of it, the clinical trial, so hopefully provides strong conclusions.
That seems like really an important and timely project in the area of diabetes prevention there. So, over the past few decades, research in healthcare quality improvement has really gained momentum. This type of research looks at how changes are implemented within a healthcare system or a process, and its goal is to make care safer and better within a clinical or public health setting. You are an associate editor of the International Journal for Quality in Healthcare. What advice would you give to people working on quality improvement and patient safety research about conducting and sharing this type of research?
My feeling is that writing up the first papers was the most difficult thing that happened to me. You need to start to find the right people to work with and to start writing up your work. And I would say quality of care journals have two paths. One is to submit traditional papers, which are clinical trials whenever you can, or other kind of papers, which are more rigorous. And then you have improvement projects. And sometimes you're in clinical practice and maybe you haven't proceeded the way to create a formal research project, and you like to show people how you and others, because no one will care about you. They will care about you, others, because if you publish, your work has to be read by people all over the world. So one clinic will not matter, but at scale might eventually be interesting. First, you can try with abstracts to conferences, but then try a journal. And remember that you have guidelines for publishing, which, for example, for quality of care called the Squire guidelines. And those are guidelines that help you to write up your paper and hopefully be accepted and then peer review, and God helps you with that. It's sometimes you can get harsh reviews, but it's the way it is.
Yep, yeah, I know. Years of being a professor has given me thick skin and in reading comments, which, have, I think, for the most part, really strengthened my work. So I think it's good to pay attention to those tough reviews as well. And you brought up a couple of important things, like a lot of quality improvement work is local, but you really need to try to maybe engage multiple sites so that, you can have more generalizable results. You also mentioned the Squire guidelines. These are guidelines to follow to write your paper or your abstract. So now let's talk about your work as the president of ISQA, which is the International Society for Quality in Healthcare. This is a non-for-profit organization that's been working to improve the quality and safety of healthcare for over 30 years. And its network of healthcare professionals span over 70 countries and 6 continents. You and I have worked together on ISQA's board for about a year now, since I started on the board. So what have been some of your priorities as ISQA's president since you started in this role?
Well, for someone from the other side of the world, in Buenos Aires, to have the chance to work in something like the UN for quality of care, because we work with almost every country around the world, I would say that, of course, a great privilege, and it's also a great challenge and opportunity. I would say that ISQA has been in place for 40 years. It has a rhythm of its own. And my only interest is to first keep the door open for officers or board members from less resource economies than us to get onto the board and to make it really global. Also to find ways, it's a small NGO and will not change the world, but quality of care can change the world of healthcare. So I have the sense that we need to keep pushing for that to happen, especially for the ones less favored. So the challenge is first to keep the boat moving, which is sometimes difficult with all the programs and challenges that we can always face in an organization, global organization. And the other thing is how you can bring people from less resource settings into quality of care to give back to their countries or regions whenever they return. And also the case of conflict areas and quality of care has been raising around the world. People have recognized that those areas also need healthcare, and healthcare should be of good quality. So that's another room of opportunity for us.
So yeah, you mentioned areas that, are facing conflicts and wars and how ISQA's work in this area is really timely. And unfortunately, continues to stay timely, right? So that's an important priority for sure. So let's talk a little bit about Buenos Aires now as we wrap up this conversation. As someone who loves to read, I was excited to find out that the city has the highest number of bookstores per capita in the world. In fact, I read about this one bookstore called El Ateneo Gran Splendid, which has been described as one of the most beautiful bookstores in the world, with its impressive architecture, its ornate carvings, and frescoes on its soaring ceilings. And its history was really eye opening. It opened back in 1919 as a cultural center with tango and opera performances. Then it became a movie theater and is now a bookstore with about 1 million visitors a year. So, of course, if I ever visit Buenos Aires, I'll put it on my list of things to check out. But to expand this list a bit, what other recommendations do you have for sites to see for a first time visitor to the city?
Well, Ulfa, my first job in life was as a travel agent when I was at medical school. So I kind of know the city a little bit. Of course, the Ateneo bookstore is very nice, but something that really will be very important for you to visit if you go for Buenos Aires the first time is the Columbus Theater. Argentinians tend to exaggerate, not like Brazilians, as much as Brazilians, but we tend to exaggerate a little bit. But probably you won't find any theater like that in the whole Americas. The hall is amazing. The acoustic, it seems to be among the nicest in the world. They say it's the nicest. Let's put it's among the nicest. It was built in 1910 for the century anniversary of Argentina's independence. So the Colón Theater is very nice. Then you have soccer. And I would say that walking around the city, it's something, there are restaurants and places which are really nice to visit. And also we have not very far, there are some nature reservations that could be interesting to visit. We have a very big river, not like the Amazonas, but the Paraná River that has a big delta that also merits to visit. It's a city that was built next to the widest river, and that's true again, no exaggerations, in the world, which is the River Plate, that it's between Argentina and Uruguay. It's very wide, it's very shallow, and it's brown. That's why it's called the River Plate, because the sun reflects on the water. It's sweet, it's not salty, and it's brown because of the mud that comes from the River Paraná. Try to make it on spring because less rain and the weather is nicer. And we're good people. We have been in travel for decades, but I would say we're good people trying to do better in very tumultuous times, but somehow we'll get there. And of course, if you make it to Argentina, give me a call. I would love to go back to my original job back in my early youth.
Yeah, no, I really lucked out with this conversation, finding out
Yes,
about your roots as a travel agent. And now I
yes,
have my personal travel agent in Argentina. Good deal.
absolutely.
Very nice. This is clearly a really productive conversation. So, now to wrap up, I spent a lot of time last year on soccer fields in Northern California as the mom of a now graduated high school soccer goalie and also spent some time as his team's doctor. So let's close our conversation today with some soccer. Argentina has produced soccer greats like Messi and Maradona. And as a teenager, I remember seeing clips of the 1986 FIFA World Cup that Argentina won, where the team's captain, Diego Maradona, scored his famous Hand of God goal. And of course, Messi led Argentina to win the World Cup in 2022. So, if a new visitor to Buenos Aires wanted to experience some of its soccer culture, where would you take them?
Well, unfortunately, soccer is kind of to be frank, very kind of violent journey if you like to go to see a live match. So it could be rough. Eventually, if you get tickets, try to get tickets in the right place of any stadium because not every section of the stadium is the same. But try to make it in a group. So if you're not going to a soccer match, because again, it's difficult to get tickets for anyone because some clubs are so popular that the stadium does not hold them. you could try to visit their museums. So Argentina has two major teams called Boca Juniors and River Plate. But going to the stadium and visit the museum, it's interesting. It's a nice experience. I would say that soccer represents somehow the country because you know that soccer, it's interesting. I wouldn't say that Argentina are good team players in general. You may sometimes be individualistic. Again, I need to correct myself. People from Buenos Aires, which are not the best ones in the country. The rest of the country is more than good, but somehow we're not the best ones, are more individualistic and selfish. So it's very curious that Argentina does this well in team sports like rugby, basketball, or soccer, because it's not only Maradona or Messi. It's somehow the team goes along them and we play rather well. If there is any France supporter with us today listening, please remember that my kids never saw such a happy day in their life because everyone were celebrating together in the country because we're somehow split in different ideologies. But the day that Argentina won the World Cup in 22, everyone was celebrating together. And that was a huge relief, at least for a day, in a very difficult moment. So make it here. We're nice people. You will find lots of interesting things to do.
Also, I think I was a little scared when you described the soccer field and the scenario, and I'm glad I'm the team doctor for my son's high school team and not a team that's in Buenos Aires or Argentina where I need to stay on the sidelines. So much safer job up here in Northern California for the team doctor for sure. And those are all the questions I have for you. Thank you, Ezequiel, for joining me on Mapping Healthcare today, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you so much, and a privilege.
That was Dr. Ezequiel García-Elorrio from the Institute for Clinical Effectiveness and Health Policy in Argentina, telling us about the pros and cons of PREMs and PROMs, patient-reported experience measures and patient-reported outcome measures. You heard about cultural and other contexts that we need to pay attention to that could affect interpretation of these data, and you also heard about how clinicians can combine their clinical and research skills to help understand and track people's experiences with the healthcare system. All right, that's all I have for you today. This was your host, Dr. Sheikh. You were listening to Mapping Healthcare on KDRT 95.7 FM, where we explore healthcare around the world, highlight people who improve it, and share what we can learn from them. This episode featured music by Fin del Mundo. You can hear Mapping Healthcare around the world anytime on kdrt.org and wherever you get your podcasts.